Welcome to Cine Bijou, where we delve into the diverse creative world of independent film with your host, Ramon Wrights.
Hello everyone, so glad you tuned in. Every fortnight through feature explorations and insightfully fun interviews, we'll make Cine Bijou your destination for discovering hidden gems and supporting the voices of indie films that deserve to be heard. So grab your popcorn and settle into your seats as we shine a spotlight on emerging filmmakers, thought-provoking narratives, and groundbreaking techniques that redefine the art of storytelling. Our first episode features an interview with a filmmaker whose penchant for storytelling, drawn from her own personal experiences, will make you laugh as well as terrify, explore, and confront your darkest demons. Like me, and I hope I pronounced her name correctly, Gabriela Staniszewska is Bristol born and bred, Bristol being the hub of homegrown cinematic talent. Gabriela's rise as a filmmaker began with her chilling debut, Blaze, a Bristol-set zombie horror, and her journey didn't stop there. With each film, she cemented her status as one of the most captivating voices in horror, action, and sci-fi, with her unique perspective and spine-tingling storytelling skills. Her cinematic tapestry is as diverse as it is thought-provoking. Welcome to Cine Bijou, Gabriela. And as I mentioned before, we're both Bristolian, aren't we?
I'm Bristol born and bred. St Andrews, Fish Ponds, primarily. And I've worked in various sort of cinemas. I've worked at the Watershed. I've worked in, it's where I met my husband. I worked at the Everyman. When I was in London, I worked at the Clapham Picture House, that kind of thing. So like, I love working in cinemas. I love cinema. I did film for my degree in London. So not filmmaking, but film, I guess. So like reading and talk criticism and stuff like that, and sort of film reading and stuff, which is kind of why I love what you do. And was a complete film obsessive. All I did, I'm an only child, only grandchild, so I watched an awful lot of movies when I was a kid. My mum brought me up on a steady kind of background of steady feeding of Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers and everything that Mel Gibson ever made at the time. She was really into Mel Gibson. I watched Tim. I mean, for God's sake, Man with That Face, Tim, Gallipoli, all of the Lethal Weapons. We also had all of Bruce Willis's work, Die Hard. And I remember that was like my favourite film when I was a kid. I remember going in for it was a very posh secondary school that I went to, and I got in on a couple of scholarships because we went out with Polish peasants, wouldn't be able to afford it otherwise. And my mum said, "Tell them your favourite film is Bella Lebet." And I was like, so because it wasn't. I mean, it was all right. She made me watch it. My mum was quite like, she pushed a lot of specific types of film on me, like a lot of 1930s stuff, a lot of kind of classic stuff like Buñuel and like Cocteau, which was. She was like, "Tell them your favourite film is Bella Lebet." And I was like, "But it's Die Hard, Mum. I like Die Hard. I want to watch Die Hard." So I did tell them. And now, funnily enough, I watched Bella. I got it recently, and I watched it again. I was like, "Bloody hell, it's amazing!" And I just absolutely adore it. And it's actually a huge influence on my work. And I didn't even realise that it actually like bled through to all of my work. So my mum's a genius. So yeah.
So that's where your film influence came from as growing up. Obviously, that was your diet of actually quite a wide range of films. Okay, Bruce Willis and Mel Gibson.
Musicals and action movies. I didn't watch horror till I was very old. I didn't watch horror because I was terrified. I was very scared of all the horror bits in. I mean, Spielberg and Cameron really came of age when I was kind of a child. So I was like hit with Raiders and sort of later Star Wars, all of that, and then like all of Terminator 2, all of that kind of stuff. So for me, like a lot of it's interesting what you said a minute ago about the fact that people think that something that's funny can't also be serious, because a lot of the filmmakers that I really kind of aspire to and I'm inspired by are filmmakers that put loads of different genres in the same film. Like Spielberg's got a lot of horror in his stuff. He's got a lot of romance in it. He's got a lot of and James Cameron's the same. I mean, there's a lot of humor in Aliens. I mean, it's just. But yeah, so I mean, things like the James Cameron's Aliens, which I prefer to Alien. I'm sorry, but I do. And like kind of just the way they introduce all the characters, like Vasquez. She's amazing. And just Terminator 2's got a lot of humor in it as well. The Abyss has got a lot of humor in it, a lot of horror in it, and a lot of Spielberg stuff has absolutely petrifying bits, but also a lot of humor. I mean, Jaws just is a roller coaster of emotions. It's like, what genre is Jaws? No one knows. So all of that stuff, like Jaws and Terminator 2 for me, Raiders and Temple of Doom was my favorite when I was a kid, and all of that stuff was really very, very formative. And so for me, the idea of being stuck in a genre is something that I don't find very exciting. I like the idea of you tell the story you want to tell in the way that you want to tell it. And if there's scary parts, there's scary parts. If there are funny parts, there are funny parts. Because that's like life, you know? It's kind of just the way it is.
It's very true. But to touch on what I said earlier, actually, about some people, it either has to be serious or it has to be funny. I think it applies to certain subjects. So I remember actually, I recommended a film, Armando Iannucci's Death of Stalin, to a boss of mine. He's from South Africa. And I said, you'll absolutely love this because it's set in the Soviet era. It is following the events of the death of Stalin. And I said, but it's all played by British actors with British accents and even just all the dialect and everything. I said, it's quite bizarre. I said, but the humor is incredible. That he satirizes the whole thing in a very genius-like fashion. And when I lent him the DVD, he came back and he said, Ramon, I didn't think that was funny. And I thought, oh, okay, it's not his taste. That's fair enough. And the reason he didn't find it funny is because growing up in South Africa when he did, I won't go into too much detail, but just to say that his experience, he had seen that sort of thing played out in some regard, in one shape or another. So for him, it was, why are you laughing at this? I lived this. So, and I think depends on your point of view, that if some people see you not making fun, but injecting humor into what they see as a serious topic.
Yes, there's ownership, in that way, like it kind of, I wouldn't necessarily have written something like Choose Your Weapon or Yummy Mummy if I hadn't gone through it myself and it wasn't an expression of my experiences. I wouldn't have just gone for it as a subject. That would be weird, if that makes any sense. But for me,
that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
So in terms of, so you were very much into film, as you said, growing up. You studied film studies at university, all aspects of it. So who influenced you? Which filmmaker influenced you when you decided this was the passion you wanted to pursue?
I'm a child of the 90s, 80s and 90s. So it was, Spielberg and Cameron for me, definitely. But then when it came to much more art house kind of stuff, I think I would say I'm a huge fan of things like Samsara and Kaina Katsi and things like that. And I can't remember the other one's called, Baraka, things like that. Uncle Boon Me, a huge fan of Japanese cinema, a massive fan of Ozu and I'm trying to remember his name, but basically I absolutely adore The Color of Pomegranates and stuff like The Color of Pomegranates, which is just stuff I would never make. I could never make anything like that. That's completely a mood piece, like Samsara or Baraka or Uncle Boon Me. I think I fell asleep in Uncle Boon Me for like an hour, and then I woke up and I can't tell which parts of it were in the film and which parts were in my dream. And for me, that's like a guided meditation. And considering what film kind of actually is, like the idea of sitting in a dark room in a cinema with your dreams playing out in front of you, it's induced dreaming. That's the whole idea of what film is supposed to be. It's somebody leading you through a dream, a guided dream. And so for me, those films really make me feel like that. But that's not the way I express myself. Like, from my perspective, whenever I make a film, I'm like, oh, so clunky. Like, it's just really obvious and kind of, in that way. So in a way, that's kind of why it's just the way I express myself. Has to be through film, because it's just obviously what I've ingested so much of. But for Yummy Mummy specifically, there were a lot of Francis Ford Coppola, the Bram Stoker's Dracula, basically. Like, I absolutely love that film. I've watched it a very, very many times. I absolutely love the aesthetic of that. I love the aesthetic of Amelie, that kind of really plush velvety cinema seats and kind of tactile, very sensuous, and what's the word for synesthetic? That kind of synesthetic experience is kind of what I go for. Especially when you're talking about female stuff to do with the body, I think it's really important to kind of use that synesthesia to work for you. And Bram Stoker's Dracula, again, is just very sensitive and like very much about the senses. It's just incredible. And well, weirdly, I've recently watched the new Mike Flanagan, his Fall of the House of Usher. Have you watched it yet?
No, I haven't. I've seen it advertised on Netflix.
Do you like
I need
Poe?
to sit down and watch it properly.
Do you like Poe? Are you a Poe fan?
Relatively.
I'm a huge Poe fan. So I Should Have Run was kind of very much Edgar Allan Poe, like kind of inspired. I kind of wanted to make a dark Dr. Seuss, but dark Dr. Seuss, it seems, is Edgar Allan Poe. So, it's kind of, very similar. And The Fall of the House of Usher is I wish I'd made it. Like, it's kind of, and that to me is the highest praise. You'd be like, I wish that was on my CV. I wish I'd said, oh, that was mine. It's so great. And a lot of Mike Flanagan's work, I really, really rate. I think it's that emotional horror. Again, we're using the horror in order to make a point that you're making about something else. I don't really go for gratuitous horror, as in like horror for the sake of horror. Don't really mind it, but that's not the way I express myself. And since I've had children, I can no longer watch horror as much as I used to, because there's always a baby death or some kind of any child in peril. I am screwed. I can't do it anymore. Used to be dogs. Any dog dies and I would be very, very upset, and I would walk out, I would leave the room and I'd have to switch the film off. Now, I'm sorry to say, I know you have dogs, so I'm sorry to say, I'm like, take the dog, leave the baby. What's going on with the baby? Like, it's kind of, it's very, I can't do it.
Listen, I'm a grandfather.
Oh my gosh.
And my wife and I have often talked. If we were ever in a situation where we had to choose, if it was life or death situation, save the grandkids, and then us second. So, and I don't hesitate in thinking. So yeah, I totally get it. If you have a scenario where you have to choose the dog or the child, you choose the child. The child lives.
I know.
As much as we love our dog, yeah.
To be honest, the dogs would probably be all right. I mean, like, dogs are they're pretty clever. Not as clever as cats. We have a cat, so I'm a bit more like, cats would eat you in a jiffy. They wouldn't care. I mean, your body's lying there for a couple of days. You're like, well, waste not, want not. So.
So let's talk about your work. Certainly the first 3 short films that you've done, that's on your resume. But we don't have to talk about it in any particular order. We can talk about your favorite of those 3, or we can just bounce back and forth. It's fine. You mentioned that. Now, I should point out, I made a point of watching those films without reading any of the spiel, so that I could formulate my own opinions and interpretations. As I was watching I Should Have Run, I noticed 2 things. One, it was very Edgar Allan Poe, because there was that poetic element. It could have almost been a modern, I would say it's a modern day The Raven. And the way it was filmed, the way it was told, the way you delivered because that's you in the film, isn't it? That's you.
Yeah. It was
you delivering the monologue. So that stood out to me straight away, and it had me gripped. And I took so many interpretations from that. I think for me personally, it was being completely swallowed and engulfed by fear. By despair. I read later that there's a bit more to that. The other thing I noticed is you filmed that on the Bristol Bath Cycle Path, didn't you? Yes. I know exactly where you filmed it, because I used to ride that to and from work, sometimes at night, and I was always a little bit, okay, big stocky male, shouldn't be afraid of anything, but it's just
tunnel. Everyone's been mugged in there. Everyone's been mugged in that tunnel. Like, I haven't. My God, but it takes 7 minutes to walk down that tunnel. It is a long tunnel, and it used to not be lit. Like, that's the other thing. They used to not have any lights in there, so that must have been like, you just get in it at night and you just cycle to the light. I mean, you don't even know what's in front of you. That's it. How dangerous is that? Like, that's quite bad. But yeah, amazing tunnel.
That was an interesting film, because you drew on, again, you drew on a lot of personal experiences, and from what I gather, a difficult time. because you suffered quite a loss and you were
Yeah.
grieving. I won't go into too much detail. People who want to know can go to your website and read all about it. But what compelled you to turn that experience into this film? Did you feel it was a coping mechanism?
Yes, definitely. But also it was, I mean, I'm happy to talk about it. It's my best friend committed suicide in 2015, and suicide's a very tricky one because people are kind of want to be very supportive, but also no one really knows how to talk about it, and so it's a tricky type of death, and it's a very specific type of death. And when I actually mentioned that it had happened, kind of on my social media, lots of people came out of the woodwork and said, this is a very different type of death when that happens. It's not just like a natural death that happens later, or sickness or illness, or they're in a better place or anything like. It's very strange. And for me, kind of, the film is about, I was trying to explain to my own mind why she would do that rather than come to me. We'd been friends since school, and she was my maid of honor for my wedding, and she was planning my kind of bridal shower, and then this happened like a month after that, really. So it was kind of, we never got to it, and it was all very, it was a very strange time, and it was just kind of trying to resolve it in your head, like the whole why didn't you, so many questions, and you're never going to get any answers. That's the problem. Like, it's real, like there's no one you can ask, there's no one because it's done, like it's done. So it was a response to that. It was very much about that last 5%, which you can't ever understand. That if you want to try and understand 100% of why somebody decides to do this, to take their own life and leave everybody, then it's like you can maybe understand after a deep dive 95% of it, but the last 5% is never going to be something that you can understand, because if you did understand it, you would do the same thing, because that would be total understanding and in some way agreement. Like, if that, you know what I mean, that last 5% was too far for me, and that's the bit that I could never really delve into. And this film was very much about allowing your depression or your fear to let you lie to everybody else, to sort of allow you to lie to everybody else about whether you're okay, and to kind of, what's the point? It's your life. Like, it's kind of, that's basically what it was about. It was about sort of questioning what the point of telling people that you're okay is if you're not happy. Like, it's why lie to this monster and to protect it. And that's kind of what it was about, because the monster's trying to eat you.
There's a lot of that in your work, I think you are telling your own story, and you are working through things, so much of what goes on in your life. Your earlier work before that, I mean, Blaze, first of all, that is your first film, from what I gather.
Yeah.
I thought that was a genius bit of filmmaking you did there, considering the budget was on, considering the constraints that you had. There was definitely some elements of Romero I spotted. So that whole confined in the space and the gradual sort of collapse of the dynamic. And then again, did remind me of 28 Days Later, especially the full descent into madness. Love the ending. And if anybody wants to see how that ends, they should go to your site and check it out.
Yeah, I mean, Ben James, the director, that was all him. He was really very much the lead on the style of the film and where we wanted to go with it. I co-wrote it with him, and then I produced, co-produced with a lovely man called Paul Hassan, who is a powerhouse. And it was a baptism of fire into filmmaking, I would say, because there are so many. All I can see is the issues with it that we had on the day and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, it was a baptism of fire. It was a huge learning curve for me, and I'm really glad that we did it, because it was like being pummeled in the face with a shovel repeatedly for a week, and then having to make something out of that.
What lessons did you learn from that experience? Everybody learns a lot from their first film. What did you learn?
Storyboard. We didn't have a storyboard. Make sure well, continuity. We learned which roles are really important. Storyboard, script supervisor, we think first AD. That would have been, that we just didn't know. I didn't have a clue how a set worked. I'd not been on a set before. So we just kind of put together who we thought needed to be in charge of things. None of us had been on a proper set before. So we made it up. And it was, that was kind of, when you go on a real set, you're like, oh, right, that's why they, makes sense. Yeah. So it was kind of that, really. And then when I went on real set, I was like, that's what we needed. That's what we liked. So we didn't have any ADs. We had runners, but they were all taken by trying to stop the river of mud going into the set, which was basically every day, because it was just at the bottom of the gully in Blaze, and it was raining solidly for 1 week in the summer, which is when we were filming. So it just kind of, you can see that it's wet in the film, and they were just constantly trying to make a channel for the water to go into so that it avoided all our equipment. So yeah, I would say storyboarding, and having that kind of overview from writing to what's happening on set to the edit, because those three things were so dissonant and disparate in that way, and just very different to each other, that I like to have an overarching influence over the whole thing. And lots of people do say the film you write, there's three films: the film you write, the film you shoot, and the film you edit. And although that's true, that's very stressful, especially if you write and direct your own work. You're like, well, that's not what I wanted to be, the thing. So it's kind of important for me to have that kind of influence, and level of control, I guess, over the piece. And that's why a script supervisor is like super important, because you don't know what's going on. There's a lot of stuff happening on set. So you need somebody to be like, knock, knock, knock. Sorry, just so you know, if you do this doesn't match with that, and then you won't have that in the edit. You made that decision because you know the consequences of this. That would have been super great. And actually, like a previs kind of storyboard situation, I mean, that would be ideal. But then you lose some of the magic if you previs everything. But it's kind of, previses are great, especially with action. I mean, you need Gareth Evans uses a lot of previs, and he just literally just does the same. Like he'll shoot it and then just fill it in, which is great. I mean, like, that's amazing, and it must make everybody feel really safe. But it is, I imagine every filmmaker's dream to be like, and then you just shoot it, just do this, bye. That would be nice. So yeah.
If you want to support our mission to promote independent film, find us on Instagram, X, and YouTube. Make sure you like, subscribe, maybe even leave a comment or two. Thank you for listening. Now back to the show.
So it was a real learning experience. Like you said, it was a learning curve for you. And then you went on to do The Spring, which again is I think I liked it. I thought I got what it was trying to say, but I am curious as to why you chose that storyline to film.
Well, I wrote it again because it was in response to reading a lot of Ayaan Hirsi Ali's work, and she is a very pro-feminist kind of lady. I think her politics might have changed since I read her stuff, and I might not necessarily align with her politics nowadays, but at the time it really moved me. And it was her biography, her autobiography about growing up in Sudan, and kind of the idea of forced marriage, but with lying being in there, as in like, it's going to be great. And then you're like, yeah, but what do you mean it's going to be great? This is what I'm told it's going to be great. And then like all of a sudden you realize that it's not only not going to be great, it's not at all what you thought it was. It's the whole reality of it has been whipped away. That's what I wanted to kind of talk about, the whole idea of when people say, we're separate, but we're equal. And you're like, really? And then actually separate but equal, that the whole idea is that it's like set in a dystopian future where you have women on one side of the panel and men on the other side of the panel, and they're completely told that everybody on the other side is exactly the same as they are. It's totally separate and totally equal. And then she realizes that it's actually not. They're all super rich and having a bloody great time over there, and all laughing at her plight, and at women, and how dumb they are for buying this lie that they've been proliferating. So that's kind of, it's very emotional. Like it was very dramatic storyline, and kind of in that way. And also I was very much against spoon feeding the audience, which is why it doesn't make any sense, because that was again a learning curve of realizing that you do need to spoon feed the audience, because you do need to tell people what's going on. It can't be, if you're going to be abstract, be Baraka, be Uncle Boonme, be or a Colour of Pomegranates, be abstract. create a mood. But if you've actually got a story, you need to tell people what the story is. And yeah, it makes no sense. Those two, I would say, are my like learning films. And then the first one that's like, this is actually what I want to do, how I want to do it, is I Should Have Run, I would say.
So let's talk about Choose Your Weapon and Yummy Mummy, because they have something in common, is that they are your experiences, or your experiences as a mother. What made you decide that that was a story that you wanted to tell and that maybe needed telling?
I went to my postnatal NCT group and I said I was having all these thoughts in my brain, and they all went, oh dear, and then carried on with their lives. And I was like, am I insane? Like, what the hell? Like, this is really like not, no one was talking about it. Nobody had told anybody that they were having these things. And then suddenly I found, like, I did my own research. I Googled it and basically was like, oh, invasive thoughts. That's exactly what I'm having. I didn't know these existed. I didn't have a clue. No one told me about them. No one warned me about them. Everybody was always saying, are you sad? Are you sad? Are you blue? Like on the form, are you very blue? Are you feeling sad? You're like, no, I'm not feeling sad. I'm feeling very, very frightened and very, very angry. And they are like the flip sides of both coins. Like, I'm feeling fight or flight all the bloody time. And they were like, okay, great. So you're doing well. Brilliant. Tick. And you're like, it's totally not. What? So there was a lot of that. And that's what it was. Basically, I then found a lot of information about lucid dreaming online, because that's when it would happen. It would happen at night when I was breastfeeding, and breastfeeding kind of has a massive rush of oxytocin, the love hormone. So you have that hormone rushing through your body, and it's late at night. And if anybody is an insomniac, they know that there's nothing more fun than your thoughts late at night when everyone else is asleep and you're supposed to be asleep, but your brain is like, remember that stupid ass thing you did when you were 15? Yeah, you're a dick. And you're like, thanks. Thank you so much. That's really exactly what I want to hear right now. But it was just like, my brain would just come up with like, what if this happened? What if this happened? Oh my God. So you can't leave the house now, because what if a bear came? Bears can come. Bears live here. And you're like, no, they don't. We can't go to the zoo just in case I accidentally drop her into the like aquarium or something. It was just like, it was ridiculous. It was just, my brain came up with every single nice thing that I thought, oh, we could do this and maybe we could start this class. No, that's the reason why not. Can't do that. Get run over by a car. No, can't do that. No. And you're like, and it literally just, I felt like all the doors were just shutting. Like, can't do that with her. Can't do that with her. Can't do that with her. I'll just stay in the house. I'll just stay in the house on my own with her, because I'm terrified to go out in the world. And it's not just a postnatal thing. Invasive thoughts happen in a lot of PTSD situations, and I've spoken to many parents about this. Other writers who have kids who've had similar kind of thoughts, and the kind of most poetic way of putting it, I guess, would be, is it feels like it's post-traumatic like stress response to a massive onslaught of love. Like, you love your child so much. You've never loved anybody. I thought I loved before. I thought I had feared before, but no, I was like slightly scared of spiders and heights. No, like, it's the shock. And PTSD for me, the PTSD I've suffered and the invasive thoughts I've suffered are from the shock of the amount of love I felt for this person. And that's what it was. It was just like, as soon as I felt that, it was all the things that could go wrong and she could be taken from me. It was all the fear that happened with, like, once you love somebody that much, what happens if they go? Like, fuck. It was just really, that was a lot. And that was where the fear kind of came from. And when I had a look at this lucid dreaming technique, basically a lot of people that had done this kind of thing, they basically said, pick a weapon out of your backpack, or like find something that you can use, which is very Jackie Chan, isn't it? It's like, find a prop, use it. And so I would pull out a crossbow out of my backpack, and my brain would be like, why would you have a crossbow in your backpack? That's really dumb. And you're like, well, you're dumb. Why would somebody be trying to steal my baby? Why would this happen? The whole thing is dumb. And then my brain would kind of toddle off, sort of chagrined. And I did that repeatedly, and it went away. Like, it was, I couldn't afford therapy. Who can? And I couldn't afford therapy. There was no help on the NHS. Nobody told me that it was a thing that I was supposed to be struggling with. So when I found it and found how to kind of conquer it myself, Choose a Weapon for me was a bit of a PSA for everyone else, because a friend of mine said her sister was suffering from it, and she said, I remember you did something, what was it? And I tried to explain it, and then I thought, you know what, I should just write this as a script, because it's a really important lesson that people need to know, that it's not just postnatal anxiety. You can use this for any stress situation where you're having invasive thoughts to get yourself out of them.
Well, the message was quite strong, and I think basically if people didn't pick up on it, then they need to go back and watch it again, and then maybe they'll see it this time. But for you personally, in making that film, like with I Should Have Run, which was an exercise for you to work through some things, did you find that Choose Your Weapon actually helped you in any way reconcile it all, or be more accepting of it and the experiences that you've had?
Yes, because it made a lot of people come out of the woodwork and say, oh my God, I've experienced this as well. When we were filming, a friend of mine was the on-set photographer, and she was locking off to make sure people didn't walk into the shot. And a lady was about to walk into shot, and she stopped her and said, I'm really sorry, we're filming this, blah, blah, blah. The lady asked what she was filming, what we were filming, and she explained. And the lady said, I was sectioned for 6 months after I had my second child because I had invasive thoughts, and I can't believe no one talked about it. And it's amazing that you're talking about it. And my mum said that she had, like, I mean, my mum had postnatal anxiety massively, and she was like, you've actually put like a name to it. People have been suffering with this for a long time, and no one talked about it. Mothers just went through this on their own and thought they were mad, or thought there was something wrong with their brain. So in the same way that when I talked about suicide with I Should Have Run, it made a lot of people come out of the woodwork and say, I experienced this. Yes, it really did help me, because it made me feel like I wasn't alone. And also the knowledge that in starting this conversation, other people were being helped. Just feeling like you're not on your own is really helpful. And that woman just walking past randomly, you're just like, that's crazy. How many people must feel like this if just the woman that walked past had the same experience, you know? So for me, that really helped. Although I do, you know, I've had my second child now, and still, if she wakes up in the night and it's like late at night, I have to still practice. It's a practice. It's like meditation. You have to practice the lucid dreaming technique, otherwise your thoughts will get you. And it's the lack of sleep. Luckily, the second child sleeps. The first one did not sleep through until she was 4, until she started school. And so because of that, it was, I mean, lack of sleep fundamentally changes central facets of your personality. And it just, you know, I couldn't cut vegetables because I kept cutting my hands. I was so tired. Shouldn't have been driving for sure, but like, it's just insane. Like, the people are just going around their lives in this state, and no one talks about it. You need training for it. Like, it's surely as bad as a marathon, like the lack of sleep that comes with being a new parent. It's insane. And there's a Bristol breastfeeding mummies kind of group on Facebook. There's loads of mum support groups, because there isn't any help on the NHS that I can find, or that, you know, that all the good help has now not got any funding or anything like that. So a lot of women go to Facebook, and a lot of midwives are on the Facebook, and they offer their help and services for free to help people as much as possible. And the amount of people on there saying, my baby is 6 days old, my baby is 2 weeks old, my baby is however old, I haven't slept a wink, I'm going mad. And it's like, it's real, and it happens all the time, and there's no training for it, and there should be. Like, it's kind of, I find it irresponsible of society to not deal with this. So that's why making Choose Your Weapon helped not only me, but hopefully people that watch it.
So, Yummy Mummy, both that film and Choose Your Weapon are an absolute hit. They're getting awards wherever they go. They're getting nominated for so much. They did well at last year's Fighting Spirit, which is a predominantly action film festival. And as I wrote, women dominated that whole event. You and JD.
And Kelsey as well, Kickstart Your Heart. Yeah, that was an amazing piece.
Yeah. So tell me about Yummy Mummy then. It's a film that's evaded me so far, but I know something about it. But tell me about Yummy Mummy and what experiences you drew on that to tell this story.
So Yummy Mummy was kind of, I had a really lovely experience with my first pregnancy. It was really nice, but I was very amused, I guess, by the fact that you're kind of treated like a mini celebrity when you're pregnant. people open doors for you and like carry stuff for you, and you're like, oh, thanks, that's really nice. You know, when people, everyone treats you differently when you're pregnant. They're like, oh my God, how are you doing? You're like, hey, oh, it's nice of you to ask. It's not you. No one gives a shit about you. That's the thing. It's not actually you, but it's not the baby yet either. What is it? And I found that quite fascinating, the kind of symbiotic relationship that you are. What is it that they love? What is it that society loves about a pregnant woman? Is it the potential? Is it the fact that society kind of wants to protect a pregnant woman because it's like the whole, like, you know, kith and kin, that whole like kin selection, that whole idea of actually just like protecting those around you, and making sure that the perpetuation of the species, you know, that kind of thing. Maybe that kind of evolutionary instinct. But I was just fascinated with it, and it also made me think about, you know, which identity is the one that's foremost in this interaction, in this relationship with wider society around you. You know, getting on the bus, the bus driver will stop. The bus driver will not drive past you if you are pregnant. The bus driver will stop and, hello. Hello. It's just like, what is this? And then as soon as you've got a baby and you've got this massive thing and like carrying all this stuff, and that's when you need help. I would like some help now. That would be much better, please. You know what I mean? It's like, it doesn't make sense. Because when you're pregnant, you're all like streamlined. You don't need any help. Your arms are free. Why do I need help now? What are you going to do? Carry me? No. I mean, it's just super weird. But it's not just men. It's everybody. Everybody treats you just very like you're a little tiny little celebrity in your own life. It's very strange. And it was a combination of that and just when people were asking you questions, the medical kind of community asking you questions, and your family and friends asking you questions. It's also not about you. It's about you and the pregnancy being both you and the baby. Where does one end and where does everybody end and where does everybody begin? So it's kind of about identity in early motherhood, pregnancy and early motherhood. And then it kind of became about the fact that when you have a baby, everybody switches. Your identity switches for everybody. Everybody shifts up. You know what I mean? You're then going to be mummy as well as Gabriela. I am now mummy or mama forevermore. That's it. That's switched. I'm never going to be just Gabriela again. That's never. My husband is never going to be just him again. Like, you're never going to not be a grandparent again. That's it. It just shifts up when you become a grandparent. Again, it shifts up for everybody. And in the film, you've got a mother-in-law who becomes a grandmother. And it's a shift of identity, but for everybody when you inject this life into the world. And I find it's quite similar to death. Obviously, life, death, polar opposites in theory, but actually I find the experience quite similar in that if you have, I don't know, this is my metaphor for it. If you have your kind of personality and your sense of self and your sense of stability is kind of like a plate on top of loads of columns, or like, you know, a plinth on top of loads of columns. And then one of the formative people in your life, like my best friend or my dad, who died later that year, that was a good year, gets whipped away, then you have to rebalance that plinth. You have to move the pillars around to make it balance again. It takes you a while to kind of get that working. And I would say a birth of somebody is the same thing. You've got a plinth here, and then this massive pillar just gets shoved in from nowhere, and you've got to rebalance because it's also slightly taller and it's made the other one shorter, and everything's kind of got to rebalance. And it's a similar thing, but it's injecting as opposed to removing. So I would say that's kind of why I feel like birth has a similar importance or impact to people's lives as a death would. And a rehashing of your identity because of that. And it was also quite influenced by that episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer where that girl gets ignored so much that she eventually disappears. That whole idea as well is very much in there. And yeah, the spell of pregnancy and how that kind of plays out in a wider society. And when you are going through it, it's a very strange time. It's an amazing time, but it's very weird. And I just don't know why no one has talked about it before in that way. There's also a lady who wrote an article, I can't remember what her name was about it, but she talks about transformative experiences. And she explains a transformative experience as something that is it transforms you because of knowledge that you gain. And she specifically mentions becoming a vampire as a transformative experience. Like, that's the best way of explaining what one is. You cannot in any way explain to a non-vampire what it is to be a vampire. You can try and explain, but they can't really do it, because you're not going to really explain how all your priorities are going to change. It's going to be about the blood. Everything's going to be about the blood. You won't be able to, you're not going to be dying anymore. So that's all different. Like, it's just, the changes are super huge becoming a vampire, I imagine. So that's what she kind of like sort of said, like that kind of transformative experience, and you can't explain it to the non-vampire at all what it's going to be. It has to be done. It has to be experienced to be understood. And she said the mundane versions of that, like when I say mundane, I mean just sort of a daily, everyday kind of versions of a transformative experience would be going to war or becoming a parent. And I think it's quite interesting that becoming a parent and going to war are in the same category here. Like, it's kind of, yeah, you can't undo what you've seen after. It makes me think of the Hurt Locker, like that was scene when he's in the supermarket just trying to buy cereal after he's done what he's done. And you're like, we've seen what he's seen. It's just impossible. Your life, your priorities have changed. How you can kind of come back into society or back into your identity after this huge change has occurred is what the struggle is with early parenthood, I think, for both sides. Not just, I think it just starts earlier for women because you have the whole pregnancy to go. Whereas guys, when baby is handed to you, boom, change, huge.
In a way, we're going through a really positive stage where more women are making films, but they're not just making films, they are telling their stories like you are, and they're putting women at the front and center of their stories. So do you think that is definitely happening now, that especially in horror with people like the Jen and Sylvia Soska, who make films about women taking control of their identity? Do you think we're seeing now more interest in female horror directors telling their stories?
Yes, I think there's a lot of women in horror, a lot more women in horror than there are anywhere else, I would say, because drama is more of a difficult thing to do, because in a way everyone does drama and it's so broad that it's almost too broad to be able to kind of be a big fish in that. You're just going to be a tiny minnow in an ocean. Whereas at least with horror, it's such a specific genre that you can be really extreme. I mean, I recorded Titan 2 nights ago. I still haven't seen it. I'm very excited about watching it. It's going to be batshit. I'm really, really excited. I love her work. I love Raw. And Censor, I think, was on last night as well. And Prano is a mate of mine. And what an incredible piece that is. I mean, it's just, I know a lot of female horror filmmakers, because there are a few of us out there, and we all have our own things that we want, our own flags we want to fly. The things that we're saying are completely different. And in a way, I kind of like, I don't want to define myself by the fact that I'm a woman. I want to define myself by the fact that I'm a filmmaker. Like, that's, it has no bearing. I mean, it has a bearing in the fact that the things I'm talking about are inherent to me, and I am a woman, and obviously pregnancy and motherhood and stuff like that. But I'm not wanting it to be necessarily something that defines me. It's just that was the biggest impact of my life that I really wanted to talk about. But then I should have run again. That wasn't necessarily a particularly female story. It was just a story about death. And so for me, I want to talk to the people who are interested in the subject. So for Choose Your Weapon, it happens to be mothers. And if people don't get it, I wonder who those people are. Because like a lot of people who have experienced this, or mothers who have experienced deaths, I mean, some people I've actually had to say, don't watch it. You've just had a baby. Don't watch it. I'm not going to give you new ideas about like how your baby might die. It's not a good idea. So it does come with a trigger warning. So does Yummy Mummy. But it's very much, I'm making if people don't, unfortunately, when I have had people sort of say like, oh, well, that bit with the wanking is just a bit gratuitous. And you're like, is it? And you're like, have you never had somebody? It's just such a privilege to be a bloke traveling on public transport, like, and not, you're like, how many, every man I know has said that's gratuitous, and you're like, no one's whipped a penis out on you. Oh, what a shame. You know what I mean? Like, it happens to everybody all the fucking time. And that's the issue, is that you know, it's just when you go out and breastfeed, you're like, okay, that is a factor. You're just like, well, who's going to be taking pictures? There was, I think, who was it? One of the MPs, an MP lady was breastfeeding on the tube and somebody was filming her. Basically, it was that, for me, is another factor, because these fears are diseases. Like, what happens if you're breastfeeding and someone decides to wank all over you, and what happens if that stuff gets on your baby, and then your baby is covered in disease, and then you are the worst mother ever because you sat there in fear, not being able to do anything while somebody's wanked at you on the bus, because people wank at people on the bus all the fucking time. And it's just like, I mean, that's why I find it interesting that a lot of the feedback that we've had from particularly male film critics, or people kind of coming, or audience members, have been like, oh, I found that too much. It wasn't funny. And you're like, well, it's meant to be funny, dude. It's meant to be real. Like, it's kind of, it's not for you. And that kind of makes me, that's the only time I actually felt very gendered about the film. And I actually thought, this isn't for you then, because if you don't understand it, then you don't understand it. That's kind of, it's not for you. Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense. In fact, I think in talking about the rise of sort of horror for black filmmakers and black actors, Jordan Peele actually said that he made films like Get Out for everybody, but he would have been more upset if black people, black audiences, didn't get it, as opposed to white audiences. If they like it, great, but it's this community, this group of people that it was really aimed at.
Yeah.
So I was pleased that the overall response was a positive one. So yeah, I do understand where you're coming from. So as an independent filmmaker, as a female independent filmmaker, I'm sure you've noticed over the last few years that it's been a challenging time for the industry, for independent film. What challenges have you faced, or do you think is out there for a filmmaker, and what do you think people like yourself and other filmmakers, aspiring or otherwise, can do to meet those challenges head on?
Well, first of all, it's I do feel like for a lot of my life I thought there were gatekeepers, and I had to do what the gatekeepers wanted in order to get through. You know, I had to do what people wanted for me to do in order to get to make a film, be allowed to make a film. And that's probably because I came from an acting background, and being an actor, I found that I didn't like, the reason I left it is I didn't like the fact that somebody would tell me when I could work. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to work when I wanted to work. I wanted to be creative when I wanted to be creative. I didn't want that to depend on any gatekeepers or anybody sort of telling me, yes, you are good enough or you're not good enough. Didn't like that. Wasn't good for my mental health or my sense of self-esteem. So I decided to make my own work. And I would say that, I mean, there's so many prongs to your question that it kind of, so I'll start off with, first of all, franchises and all of that. Yes, it's the big shit is dying and it's killing it all off, and it's disgusting. And I find, you know, it's very, very sad. And you've got places like The Watershed and The Everyman in some ways, and Avonmead's Showcase is like a really good art house cinema, and people don't go to that enough. It is the most, I love that cinema. And you've got a lot of little cinemas that are kind of really trying to big up the kind of the independent stuff. I mean, Baby Club is something I've been going to at the Everyman, which is amazing. Is you get to put your baby on your boob and watch stuff while all the babies are kind of moving around and doing stuff. It's like going to the cinema with a bunch of cats. It's very weird, and the lights are kind of half on, and the sound is down low. So it's, you know, it's kind of like that. But like I've gone every single week, and I've seen so much. It's been so great. Like Rye Lane was an incredible piece, and I would actually say that a lot of the pandemic hitting and the writers' strikes and all of the stuff that kind of happened in order to really scupper the main part of the industry, the big part of the industry, meant a lot of this stuff could bubble up from underneath. I mean, you know, what was the one that won that year? Oh my God, Everything Everywhere All at Once was an incredible film. And I wonder if it had got as much kind of heat behind it if it hadn't been for the fact that it was like the only thing made that year. Like there was so much stuff that was just still being made from before, that was just being in post when the pandemic hit, that it kind of meant that it kind of kept everything afloat, but none of the big stuff, because the big stuff gets a really, really high turnover. So none of that stuff was being sort of made or pushed out. Then you have Tom Cruise, president of movies, who went to the MP's house and went, this is my plan for how I'm going to create a set that is COVID safe. And the MP clearly just went, Tom Cruise, and yes, anything you want. And then basically Tom Cruise designed how COVID sets were going to work. That was Mission Impossible. That was what did it, I believe, from what I've read and from what I've heard. And it was kind of, he's trying to keep bums on seats in the cinema as much as he possibly can, which is incredible. And there's things like Maverick that have to be seen in the cinema, and Mission Impossibles that have to be seen in the cinema. But with the streamers happening, I'm watching an awful lot more films. So if it's about people watching films, I'm seeing a lot more because I'm watching it at home. I don't have to go to the cinema to see it, but I love going to the cinema. And if I had my own time, if I didn't have, 2 kids and people to look after and all this kind of stuff, I would just sit in a cinema and let the films roll for days. Just bring me snacks. I'd happily just sit there in this kind of lucid, this liminal state of like, just tell me stories, bring them, put them in my eyeballs. I would absolutely love it. It would be amazing. But from a filmmaking perspective, like how to actually do it, considering there are gatekeepers, and considering Woody Allen in his last interview at Venice Film Festival was talking about how the worst part of filmmaking for him was raising funds. And you're like, you're fucking Woody Allen, you need to raise funds. You don't just say, I'm going to make a film now, bring me things. He doesn't do that. He still has to raise money. Most of the public funding in this country goes to already well-known filmmakers, like, because they are a sure thing. I mean, it's very, very supportive, the public funding, but that's all we've got. We don't have pools of private funders. In America, you have pools of private funders, so it's a bit easier to get somebody behind them. Here you've got to find a friendly hedge fund manager, but those two worlds don't mix very often. That would be a great thing, to get those two worlds to mix, like the kind of high finance people wanting to take a punt on a movie and people who need their films financed. That's what would really, really help, because we need private funding in this country. But the other side of things is, if you want to get your work made and you have got a script and you've got a film, put your script into script competitions with cash prizes. They do exist. Choose Your Weapon won the IMDb Script to Screen Awards in 2021. That was a $5,000 cash prize, and it helped us finish the film. We'd already got some funding before that, but basically it helped us pay for the post-production. So if you've got $5,000 and you've got a very, very small film with a lot less kind of needing to do in it, you can make that and then put it into festivals, and then off you go. You're off on the roller coaster, off it goes. But that would be my first bit of advice. Write something, win something, win some money, and then make it. Just go, go, go. And don't let anybody tell you that you can't do it, because the only thing that makes you a filmmaker is making a film. So go for it. No one gets to tell you that you're not a filmmaker.
Thank you for joining us on Cine Bijou, where we shine a spotlight on independent films and the creative minds behind them who continuously push the boundaries of storytelling. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to spread the love by sharing it far and wide on social media using the hashtag #SupportIndieFilm. Until next time, keep listening, keep supporting, and keep the indie spirit alive.